How's it going, YouTube and vinyl community? This is NateGreat321 with my first ever pickups video on this channel. If you haven't watched my intro to the VC video, go ahead and check that out. I'll link it below. I just explain a little bit about myself, my record collecting history, and things like that. So I thank you for staying tuned and checking out my pickups video. Now, I do have a decent amount of records to show that I've picked up within the last few weeks, but I'm actually going to divide them up into a couple different videos just to try to keep them relatively short. These 9 that I'm going to show today I got at the Milwaukee Music Fest, which was a record show that happened on December 27th in Milwaukee. I was back visiting my parents for Christmas, who live in northern Illinois, so Milwaukee was about less than an hour away from there. I found the show on a listing online and figured I'd go ahead and check it out. Now, if you're just getting into vinyl, or even if you've been collecting for a while and you've never been to a record show, I highly recommend you seek one out in your area and go. It's one of my favorite ways to pick up records. You know, it mixes the fun of sort of crate digging and looking through a selection like you would at a normal record store, but at the same time, you're getting, in my opinion, a more well-curated selection of records. You're going to see a lot of things at record shows that you're just not going to run across at your average thrift store or even your local record store, depending on where you're at. There are a lot of people there. There is a lot of competition, unfortunately, and the sellers there typically know what they have. You're not really going to sneak getting a $90 album for $5, you know. They're going to charge a decent amount, but on the other hand, they're more willing to barter. So you're willing to get, if you buy a couple albums, they can sort of bundle it at a lower price. They're willing to haggle a little bit. Like I mentioned at this show, I got 9 albums. I did also pick up a handful of singles. I do buy the odd 45 here and there. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to stick to the 12-inch albums. I can show my singles collection down the road if you guys want. Now, I know I said I was going to focus on 12-inch albums in this video, but the first one I'm going to show is actually a 12-inch single. This is Tour de France by Kraftwerk. One of their later songs. This was 1983, and appropriately enough, this is actually a French pressing of the album. It's one of their more well-known songs, I think. If you've seen the 80s classic movie Breakin', then you probably know this clip. There's the vinyl itself, one version of the song on one side and 2 other versions on the other side, pretty typical of the 80s 12-inch single. I'll give you a close-up of the album art there, kind of a bike spoke sort of design to the label there. I believe this is on the EMI, French pressing like I said. I have 3 other Kraftwerk albums, and I'm still on the lookout for a copy of Computer World. I passed up on one at a record store not long ago. I really don't know why. I'm kind of kicking myself for that. That's really the only other one I want to find of theirs besides this. So I was glad to find this. This is one I've been looking at for a while. This is actually the first thing I bought at the record show. Right when I walked in the door, the first vendor had this, and it was in decent shape, so I figured I'd pick it up. This is Rush's 3rd album, Caress of Steel, and now I believe I have every Rush album through Signals except Hemispheres. That's the only one I'm missing out of that group. So I'll pick that up eventually down the road. You know, Rush, one of those bands that, in my opinion, sounds really good on vinyl, especially obviously the drums of Neil Peart and the group. It just sounds fantastic to me on that classic Mercury Chicago label there. Pretty good album. I mean, if you like the first 2, the sort of Rush and Fly By Night era, that early stuff, I think this is kind of up your alley. Great sounding record. I'm really glad to have it. Next one is Pretenders 2. This is Pretenders' 2nd album. Kind of funny thing about this, the actual on the back, I don't know if you can see, but the person who had it before me put some little red stars next to a couple of the songs. So, I mean, maybe that was their favorite songs. I'm not really sure, but that's just kind of a cool little personal touch to it. This was just $1. This was a later find in the day. This was a lady that was just trying to get rid of all her records very aggressively, I might add, so I was kind of flipping fast trying to get out of there because she was trying to recommend anything and everything to me, and it got a little annoying after a while, so eventually I found this, pulled it out, and I think it had a $5 sticker on it, and she's like, I'll give it to you for $1, so sure, whatever, lady, and I walked out of there.
Lady, you're scaring us.
I didn't look at the record when I bought it, you know, it's $1, so who really cares? but it ended up being in okay shape. And the weird thing about the actual vinyl itself is when I got it home and looked at it, I didn't recognize the label. It says Real Records, and some of the text on the label actually isn't even in English. Turns out this is a Portuguese pressing of the album, so I'm not sure how that ended up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but hey, it sounds okay, cleaned up well, plays pretty good. I really enjoyed Pretenders' first album. This one's probably not as good in my opinion. If the first album was like an A, this is maybe a B, a B+. Still worth it if you're a Pretenders fan. I think this can be had pretty cheap. Classic album right here. I'm sure most of you probably had this in your collection already. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Damn the Torpedoes. A lot of great songs on here, a lot of hits. Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, Don't Do Me Like That. Just classic songs and just a great sounding album. It got on my radar after I watched a documentary on Netflix called Sound City, produced and created by and starring Dave Grohl of Nirvana and the Foo Fighters, about a recording studio in Seattle. Nirvana famously recorded Nevermind there, and then a lot of the sort of 90s grunge bands and early 90s bands recorded albums there as well. However, back in the 70s at this recording studio, they produced a lot of great albums there. Fleetwood Mac recorded there, and Tom Petty and Rick Springfield, I guess, are the sort of ones featured in the documentary. And obviously I was aware of this album, but sort of put back on my radar after watching that documentary and hearing some of the songs again. So it was something I've been looking for a little while, just never really found it in great condition. This one's in really good condition, got it for a pretty decent price, so easy add to the collection there. An album from a band I'm looking to get into a little bit more. This is Devo, their third album, Freedom of Choice. This has the song Whip It on here, the one that they were probably most famous for. Like I mentioned in my intro video, I'm into new wave and sort of early 80s synth pop kind of stuff. That's one of my go-tos, and Devo surely is one of the pioneers in that genre. When you think of sort of cheesy, synthy, kind of weird 80s music, they're one of the first ones you think on the Standards or Warner Brothers label there. But a good album. I really like Devo. I have two of their later albums, still on the lookout for the earlier ones, the 70s ones. I've seen represses of them a lot, but I'm still personally holding out for the originals. I'm one of those people that just likes to have the original if I can, but I'll get that eventually down the road. But happy with this album, Freedom of Choice. Pretty good pickup. This is one I wasn't expecting to find at the record show, but I'm definitely glad I did. This is Aztec Camera, Highland Hard Rain, their first album. They're sort of an 80s, I guess, sort of alternative band, but more acoustic guitar based. Roddy Frame is the sort of brains behind the band there, and I believe he's also the guitarist. And I always love any kind of good acoustic guitar or even electric guitar work on vinyl, CD, whatever it is. And this definitely has some good guitar work in it on the Sire label. One of those labels I know that if I see an album on it, I'm probably going to enjoy it. Sire put out a ton of great stuff in the US in the early 80s, brought over a lot of UK artists. I believe they are either British or Scottish. I'm not really sure exactly what they are, but Aztec Camera, definitely a really cool band if you're into sort of early 80s alternative stuff, all those sort of rough trade artists from the UK. Definitely check Aztec Camera out. They're one of my favorites for sure. Alright, next one up is Pink Floyd Metal, and this one comes with a little bit of a story. If you've never been to a record show, be prepared for this kind of seller. And if you have been to a record show, you probably know the kind of person I'm about to talk about. I get to the guy's booth, and I haven't even flipped through anything. He comes right up to me and says, "Hey, everything I have, 50% off." And you think to yourself, wow, that's an amazing deal. And so you start kind of flipping through, and he's got some really good stuff there. It's sort of, standard Led Zeppelins and Pink Floyds and things like that, but stuff that, I'm definitely looking for. Then you notice everything is sort of priced extremely high. $50, $60 for albums that are normally $25, $30 or something like that. So obviously if he's taking 50% off, it sounds like a great deal, but really he's just sort of jacking up the price. So in the end, you end up paying sort of about market value for it, which is kind of, why even try to do that at a record show? Most of the people there know what this stuff goes for. You're not going to fool anybody. So I just don't like it when sellers do that kind of stuff. You see it online sometimes too, but It's sort of cheesy. I've seen it at almost every record show I've gone to. But luckily, even with the 50% off and the sort of jacked up price, yeah, I got an okay deal on this. This isn't on the Harvest label, unfortunately. This is on the Rainbow Capital label, so this is a later repress. I believe still a 70s repress though. Sounds good to me though. Cleaned up well, sounds very clean. I didn't have much experience with Pink Floyd, sort of pre-Dark Side of the Moon Pink Floyd. I've obviously heard, Dark Side and the Wall is one of my favorite albums of all time. But I've definitely been wanting to get more into their earlier stuff and just haven't really found it around me in good condition. So I was definitely excited to find this one. I gave it one listen, I really enjoyed it, especially side B, Echo. It's just an awesome song. But I want to give it, a couple more listens to let it soak in. I think I may have a little more sentimental value, personally, with Dark Side and especially The Wall. So I'll give this one a few more tries and see how it kind of settles in. But for now, upon first listen, I really enjoyed it. Definitely a cool album to have. Extremely happy to find this one. This is Joy Division, their second and final album, Closer or Closer. I'm actually never sure how you say that. You see it's got a little promo stamp down here. That's actually not that uncommon with this album for whatever reason. I've seen represses of this quite a bit. I have a repress of Unknown Pleasures, and that's one of my favorite albums of all time. I absolutely love that album, but never really gave this one much of a listen. I think I listened on Spotify here and there, but never really dove into this quite like I did Unknown Pleasures. But was still on the lookout for it, and I was definitely glad I found it. Unfortunately, it's not a earlier press, it's a later 80s repress. It's on this Quest label. And it's in decent shape, got a little kind of hairline scratches here and there, but for the most part, sounds pretty good. Again, I only give it, one listen, so to me it didn't resonate as much as Unknown Pleasures did. But then again, I've listened to that one, time and time again, so that's definitely had a lot more time to soak in. I'll give this one another listen sometime and see how it is. I mean, I'm obviously keeping it. I still enjoyed it. To me, it seemed a little more varied than the first album. There was a little more going on. Some of the songs definitely had that sort of classic Joy Division sound, but other ones sort of went way out there. And just concerning, obviously, the situation surrounding this album with the lead singer Ian Curtis, it's just sort of an eerie, sort of odd album to listen to. But definitely one I'm glad to add to my collection for one of my favorite bands from that era. And this was my final find of the day, and probably my favorite find of the day. This is Talking Heads, their seminal classic album, Remain in Light. And really happy to find this one. I've seen represses of it quite a bit, but I've never seen an original or older press. And like I said earlier, I'm the kind of person who would prefer, if I'm buying an older album, to have, even if it's not an original, just kind of an older repress of it, just because it's sort of personal preference. Nothing to say of sound quality or anything like that. It's just how I choose to collect. There is the album itself on Sire, a 1980 original US pressing. Talking Heads, a band I've really wanted to get into for some time. I was just kind of waiting for the right entry point, and obviously I think this is as good an entry point as any, for sure. Obviously everyone knows Once in a Lifetime is the big song, the big hit off this album. That's the start of side B, and so when you go through side A, there's a lot of sort of different music on that side, and it's really just sort of a great variety of stuff going on throughout the whole album. It really takes you on a great trip through side A and side B, and just fantastic sounding album. I think the collaboration between them and Brian Eno, it's just magic, really. I mean, it's those albums that they collaborated with together are all-time classics. And so looking out for some of those sort of Talking Heads albums now that I've finally gotten into them. Ecstatic to have this in my collection finally. Definitely one of those milestone albums that I'm really glad to have found there. And so those were my finds from the Milwaukee Music Fest. I thank you guys for watching. I'll have more pickups on the way. I picked up a lot of stuff since then, so that'll be coming up later in a different pickups video. So for now, this is Nate Great 321, signing out.